and everywhere else for everybody to see it. For those that can't see, I've got about 50 documents or so here. Government documents. I've got UN, UNESCO documents here about destroying the family. This is taught in the entire Western world when your government is signed on to UNESCO. We'll show people right here. When you're signed on to the UN and you're signed on to UNESCO, this is in teacher training. And it says UNESCO initially attempted to impose its international curriculum to prepare students for world government in 1949, using a 10-part series teachers titled Towards World Understanding, which stated one of its chief aims of education today should be prepare boys and girls to take active part in the creation of a world society. It also stated, I'm quoting, as long as the child breathes the poison air of nationalism, they say the same thing about the family, education and world-mindedness can produce only precarious results. As we have pointed out, it is frequently the family that infects the child with extreme nationalism. The school should therefore use the means described earlier to combat family attitudes that favor jingoism. Now, this is the corporate global government wants to get rid of your government because it's a firewall to them, in case they can't fully take it over like they've done the U.S. government. And it goes through it all. But here is Planned Parenthood in a report for the Population Council that advises the UN, and you notice this was implemented in China, compulsory abortion of out-of-wedlock pregnancies, compulsory sterilization of all who have had 2 children, payments to encourage abortion. In Travis County, where I live, they make, well, now I moved out of Travis County, actually. Point is, you pay taxes to pay for abortions. Discouragement of private home ownership. They've got other lines in here. Eliminate welfare payments for first 2 children. And it goes on to here to say, encourage women to work. Read this right here. Encourage women to work. Gloria Steinem, Miss Magazine, on record, CIA, not to empower women, but to make the state their pimp. So they're working full-time so the state gets the kids. So the house is a mess. So everything falls apart. So the kids get on drugs. So the state can be the mommy and daddy and brainwash the kids and turn them against them. Here it is. Just what we saw in Soviet Russia, in Cuba, in Communist China. And it's our government. And it's the UN pushing it. Because the corporations can't have families. They want a bunch of mindless, programmable idiots. Look, the system wants you docile. The reason a lot of people can't get angry is because the additives in the food and water have rendered you down into basically flaccid, jellyfish-like little servile drones. Myself included. And that's why men aren't men, women aren't women. People say, whatever happened today when men were women, men, women were women, cars were cars, whatever happened to that? It's called living under a eugenics system. In fact, Aaron just ran in here during the break and he said, in my article I wrote last week about China taking the children and the property of people that have more than 2 children, I put a link to U.S. government training videos from the 70s in China, where it shows an inspector that comes by and makes sure that the women are on their menstrual cycles and make sure they take their birth control pills, little inspectors. I mean, everything in this 1969 plan was implemented in China as the model. And they told that dictatorship, we'll give you all this power and move everything to your country if you'll be the model, and then using your giant workforce, you will be able to leverage the whole world to accept this new system through economic warfare. This is the heart of it. And I get up here with detailed reports about breast cancer, several thousand percentage point increase the last 50 years, the highest in the world in the U.S., and it follows according to the industrialization, the bisphenol A and the rest of it. And I get up here and I show the reports where they want to encourage homosexuality so you don't have families. And you see the TV messages making fun of families, making fun of kids, making fun of people that have children. We're the ones under attack. It's the establishment that's bigoted against us in a cold system to get rid of the family. And then they add chemicals to the food and water and the printer ink, the bisphenol A to do this. Here's more of the documents. Encourage women to work. And then we have all the different documents, Miss Magazine, CIA, all about breaking up the family. And then look where women are today, totally unhappy, turned into absolute sexual objects like they've never been before. Now I'm going to go through some more of these documents. Look at this one, Monsanto GMO corn linked to organ failure and sterility, International Journal of Bioethical Sciences. Here's people rioting for woman's face slash, men beaten and robbed for Air Jordans. We'll zoom in on some of these documents here. FDA faulted for stance on chemical in plastics. Is that camera going closer? FDA faulted for stance on chemical plastics. Again, this is 4 years ago when they were trying to bamboozle the public and not at least admit that it's sterilizing people and a carcinogen. Here's another one. Synthetic estrogen BPA coats cash registered receipts, and then it gets into the chemical being 30% higher in retail workers. That's linked to a report from the Centers for Disease Control. In fact, here's that Centers for Disease Control report. And you know what CBS does? They just say conspiracy theory. So what if it increases cancer massively? So what if it lowers your testosterone and turns men into feminine creatures and hyperfeminizes women and burns out their sexual tissues? But it didn't stop the truth from happening and coming out. In October of 2010, Canada declares BPA toxic. Move towards bans on it. So that's just some of it. We're going to go to break. We're going to come back with Dr. Busby and look at Fukushima. And then we've got Lindsey Williams coming up today. But this stuff needs to upset you. We need to get angry. We need to make this the major issue because it's so outrageous. If people just get the facts and get the word out, these globalists will fall. People got to face the horror, though. What, 2 or 3 years ago, there was the big melamine scare. Thousands of people died in China from it. Plastic in the milk. Because the plastic powder could trick the test for the level of protein in it. And they executed quite a few people for it. But when that same powdered milk hit the U.S., the FDA came out and said, you know what? Melamine isn't bad for you. That's Wall Street Journal, New York Times. You can pull that up. FDA says melamine, not bad. It's this magic wand behavior. And as you know, I don't know, 6 months or so ago, radioactive isotope levels were going up. And so they would raise the different isotope levels, depending on what isotope went up, from 25 times what it previously was, 25 times that is safe, to, in some cases, 100,000 times. And that was on the EPA's own website. And, you know, people can laugh at that, at government getting so delusional that it just waves a wand and says, don't take any precautions. Go ahead and just eat the food. You know, back in Chernobyl, for 6 months, they said, don't eat the food. Ship it in from other countries. Don't drink milk out of Europe. But when they found higher levels of radiation, in some cases 100 times in the milk, they just waved a magic wand and said, let your kids have it. And they found it in Vermont. They found it in California, all over the country. And now all that radioactive waste and the stuff from the tsunami is hitting the West Coast. Geiger counters are going crazy. The government says, don't worry, it's not bad for you. Just like for 50 years, they kept secret that big salt reactor out in Simi Valley blowing up. They kept a total meltdown as bigger than Chernobyl secret. What else is going on we don't know about? Suddenly, France has had big disasters. Suddenly, in other areas of Europe, higher radiation showing up. Suddenly, Canada's having big leaks. It's like all of a sudden, since the magic wand was waved, who knows, maybe they'll store reactors in your basement or something. And people look at this, they say it's crazy, but look at North Korea. That's just, and after our guest leaves us in about 30 minutes, I'm going to break this down. More fake wailing, millions showing up to scream and yell and worship and fake cry. Because if you don't, you go to a slave labor camp. I mean, what a joke. But that's what happens when people buy into delusion and play along with lies. And that's what our own elite are doing with all of these issues. Now, joining us is Dr. Busby, Christopher Busby. He is a chemical physicist. He's advised BBC. He's advised EU groups. He's a very respected professor, University of Ulster in Northern Ireland. And he joins us today. He's got several websites that publishes peer-reviewed work. You can look at it there. But I have to toot his horn. In fact, having him back on, we had him on quite a bit when it was getting a lot of attention and the public would actually listen. Day one, he said, we have these isotope readings. This shows there's been meltdown. Those are reactor rods being blown in the sky. This is a cover-up. This is much worse than Chernobyl. And we got criticism when he was on. People said, oh, this is fear-mongering. It couldn't be true. Months after, once it wasn't in the news, their own top scientists went public, resigned. Leaders of Japan resigned. They covered it up. There's been an exodus out of central Japan to the south. Even though the government says it's safe, the public isn't stupid. There's been reported deaths associated with radiation poisoning. The Fukushima 50 who went in. And now it's just out of sight, out of mind. So giving us a report, as we prepare to leave this disastrous year, 2011, and I'll pull up the date, exactly how long ago Fukushima was in a moment, is Dr. Busby to recap what happened and then to explain to us what he thinks may be going on with all these new disasters and where he sees this going in the future. Dr. Busby, thank you for joining us.
Yes, hello, Alex. Hi. Okay, well, I think that people in the future, looking back at this event in Japan, will recognize that this is probably one of the most serious public health accidents, if you like, that in the history of the human race. The huge amounts of radioactivity were released and still contaminate very large parts of northern Japan. And there has been a probe recently by the Japanese government into what happened. And I have to say that the probe found that all of my predictions right back at the beginning when I was on the BBC and ITN just after the accident, the catastrophe occurred, all of my predictions were shown to be accurate. Although at the time everyone was saying, like you said, this is just scaremongering, the guy's wrong, he's making it up and so on. I have to say also that nobody's apologized to me about any of this, and there's been a deathly hush about these effects, and we learn very little about what's really happening at the reactors even now. The wrong questions are being asked, and no answers are forthcoming.
And then we get Twilight Zone comments by people in the London Guardian saying, oh, I'm now for nuclear power because of Fukushima. It's so wondrous. And I mean, it's so bizarre.
Yes, well, that guy, George Monbiot, he actually took it into his head to attack me personally from the columns of The Guardian 2 weeks running and raked out an awful lot of scurrilous nonsense and lies and so on about me personally. I was quite irritated by all of that, and there's not much I can do about it. And the Guardian newspaper have refused to, they haven't allowed me to make any sort of response. So it seemed to me that this was part of a general operation that's taking place worldwide to try and push nuclear as an option to solve all of the problems relating to the energy supply to modern civilization. But my concern about all this is that the modern civilization that they're trying to fuel is something that is very bad for the people who live within it. It's actually killing people. The system itself